Hello, I'm Susan Woods of Susan Woods Nonprofit Solutions. Thank you very much for taking time from your busy schedule to complete the Starting Nonprofit tutorials. The purpose of the tutorials is to walk you through the 20 steps to starting a 501c3 nonprofit organization from scratch. This video message focuses on step 9, which is the financial data report. The financial data report lists the projected revenues and expenses using the information presented in your narrative description of activities. That is why it is created after your narrative. The first step to writing the financial data report is to brainstorm the expenses you will incur to provide the services described in the narrative. Secondly, you will divide the projected expenses into 3 categories: assign costs and calculate total costs. So let me walk you through that step. Let's say that you are planning to offer a summer reading program for third graders. When creating a financial data report for that, you will reference back to your narrative because your narrative explained everything that you plan to do in offering those services. So let's say that you are planning to rent a space, buy books, buy Chrome notebooks, buy pencils, paper, you name it. The brainstorming will allow you to write down everything that you will need to offer that reading program. And that includes the human resources that you need. You will need a teacher, probably an assistant teacher. You may need an administrative assistant to keep track of all of the rosters and grade reports and things like that that you need. So you will write all of those things down in a brainstorming session. And it normally would take you at least a full day to do a thorough or to create a thorough list. After you've created the list, then you want to divide the list, everything on the list, into 3 categories. Those 3 categories are program services, operational expenses, and personnel expenses. Again, the 3 categories that you will divide your list into are number 1, program services. Now, program services are the services that directly touch the client. So, the laptop computers directly touch the client. Pens, pencils, paper directly touch the client. Everything that directly touches the client is included in that first category, program services. The second category, operational expenses. Those are the expenses that you incur to rent the facility. If you if you provide transportation for your clients, then transportation costs will be included in operational expenses. So anything that you have to pay for to operate the program, that's an operational expense. And then the third category of expenses will be your personnel expenses. And that includes everyone that you will use to provide the services. Like I said, the teacher, the administrative assistant, and the assistant teacher. Now, one thing I want to highlight here, although the teacher and the assistant teacher are members of your personnel team, they would not be included in that third category of personnel expenses. They would actually be included in the program services because they directly impact the student. They have direct contact with the student. So they would be considered as a program service expense and not categorized in the personnel expense. Now, the administrative assistant will be listed in the personnel expense because they do not have direct contact with the client who is the student. So make sure you have that understanding when it comes down to personnel expenses. Ideally, 60% of your expenses will be allocated to program services expenses. 60% of your expenses should be allocated to program services. The other 40% will be divided between operational expenses and personnel expenses. They don't have to be divided 20-20. They're divided however they fall. And that's the goal. You want to spend most of your money in program services because you want most of your money to go toward providing services for your clients. Now, after you have divided your projected expenses into three categories, now you need to assign costs to each expense. So when you assign cost to each expense, you have to do the research. You have to find out how much does it cost for a laptop computer, and then multiply that cost by the number of students you plan to have in the class. And you would do that for every single thing you wrote down when you were completing your brainstorming and when you've completed your three categories. When you talk about personnel costs, I always use the Bureau of Labor Statistics, bls.gov, to locate information about personnel costs so that I would have correct information. So I would go to bls.gov to look up the fee or the salary for a teacher, for an assistant teacher, and for an administrative assistant. Lastly, you want to calculate all total costs. When you add up all costs together, then you will have what your budget is in your financial data report in terms of expenses. Now, we can't just list all of this information without providing a source. So you have to provide the source where you receive the information to calculate your cost. Like I said, I use the Bureau of Labor Statistics for my personnel costs, so I will use that as my source of information. You may use Dell computers for the cost of the laptop computers. So you will list Dell computers, but you have to list a source for all of your expenses to create credibility and accountability. Finally, when you are ready, when you've calculated all of your expenses, all of the total costs, then you have to create your projected revenues. The revenues must either equal or exceed the expenses. You cannot submit a financial data report in the red. In other words, you cannot have more expenses projected than you have revenues projected. Now, you may say, well, how do I know where my revenues are coming from? Let's say your budget for the summer is going to be $35,000. You have a revenue stream, or you should have a diversified revenue stream that you can use to generate revenues to total $35,000 a year. Now, here are some examples of revenue sources. You have grant writing, you have fundraising proceeds, you have individual donations. People just give money as tax deductible donations. And you have the opportunity to charge tuition for the students to participate in the reading program. And then finally, you may be able to sell some of your workbooks. Maybe your organization isn't the only one providing a reading program for third graders. There may be other organizations that would like to do the same thing but don't have the materials or the workbooks that they need to do it. So you can provide that service. That's another way to generate revenues. Again, you want to diversify your revenues so that you don't have to rely upon one source. Once you've determined how you want to break down the $35,000 among the revenue sources, then you add that to your financial data report. I always start with my expenses because you can calculate expenses by following the steps that I explained. Then I go back to determine how I want to allocate the expenses among the different revenue sources. So that's how you create a financial data report. I use a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to create my financial data report, and I include formulas in the spreadsheet so that if I need to make changes, the results are automatically calculated. So we have finished step 9, which is the financial data report. And I know it's a lot of information. And again, it's going to take time for you to write a good financial data report. Don't be skimpy. Don't feel like you're writing down too much in expenses because Whatever the costs are, you want to be clear about how much things are going to cost. So don't ever feel like you are writing down too much because you can't. You want to be honest and you want to have a fair financial data report. So let's get busy. Step number 9, write the financial data report. Again, I'm Susan Woods of Susan Woods Nonprofit Solutions. I started a 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2006. I offered 2 programs underneath my organization over a 10-year period. Although I don't offer any programs right now, I still have my 501c3 status because I file my Form 990N e-postcard every year indicating that I didn't generate any revenues, but I would like to keep my status just in case I decide to offer programs again in the future. I've earned 3 nonprofit management certificates, one from Duke University, one from Wake Forest University, and one from Winthrop University. I'm also a 3-time graduate of Winthrop University. I earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, a Master of Arts in Teaching Business Education, and a Master of Business Administration degree. I teach in-person nonprofit classes and I also offer online nonprofit classes. I complete the Form 1023 application for recognition of exemption for clients across the country. So as you go through these tutorials, if you decide that you just do not want to go through the process of completing the application packet yourself, please visit my website at www.trustsusanwoods.com. Click on the reserve consultation link and let's talk about your 501c3 vision and the programs you would like to offer. Thank you again for participating in the Starting Nonprofits tutorial. I really appreciate your time. In this tutorial, we focused on step 7, which is writing the bylaws. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free again to visit my website at www.trustsusanwoods.com or send me a text message at 704-968-2769. Finally, once again, if you just want me to do all the work for you, I'm happy to do it. Just go to my website, click on the reserve consultation link, and let's get started. I'm Susan Woods of Susan Woods Nonprofit Solutions. Thank you for your time.